When Axar's transport finally undocked from the Galactic Council station, he did not feel relief. He felt something colder, something heavier. The vast stars beyond the viewport looked the same as they always had, distant and indifferent, but now they carried a new meaning. Somewhere among them, a species had just stopped pretending. On Earth, the reaction was quiet at first. No dramatic speeches. No immediate mobilization. No public declarations of outrage. Just meetings. Closed rooms. Dim lighting. Faces worn by history. The United Earth Council sat in silence as the intercepted letter was read aloud. No one interrupted. No one argued. By the time the final sentence echoed through the chamber, everyone already understood the truth that had settled like lead in their stomachs. They had wanted to believe the galaxy was better. That was the real mistake. The diplomats who had returned from the exchange spoke next. Not with anger, with disappointment. The kind that scars deeper than rage ever could. They described the looks they'd received, the casual intimidation, the laughter, the way predators treated the idea of peace like a weakness to be exploited. One of them, the man who had nearly attacked his harassers, didn't speak at all. He simply removed his jacket, still stained faintly from where the water had soaked in days before, and placed it on the table. A reminder, no one needed explanation. The military representatives waited patiently. They always did. When they finally spoke, there was no triumph in their voices, no smug satisfaction, only confirmation. This is exactly what we warned about. Humanity had not evolved past violence. Humanity had survived it. And survival had left marks. The budget vote passed with overwhelming consensus. Shipyards that had been scheduled for decommission were quietly reopened. Research projects once shelved under the banner of restraint were reclassified as defensive necessities, not because humanity wanted war, but because the galaxy had shown its hand. Out there, weakness was an invitation. Back on the Galactic Council station, panic spread slower and then all at once. Predator species noticed it first. Human delegations began withdrawing from informal gatherings. Cultural exchanges were politely canceled. Joint research sessions postponed indefinitely. No accusations were made, but the shift was unmistakable. Prey species noticed next. Those who had watched humans speak gently, who had been fascinated by their patience and strange optimism, began to worry. Humans had listened to them, helped them, protected them in small, quiet ways. Now those same humans were distant, polite, and gone. And the predators? They left. At first. Until the reports started arriving. Human merchant convoys were no longer lightly escorted. Human vessels began traveling in formation. Human ships no longer altered course to avoid conflict zones. And when pirates tested them, as pirates always do, there were no warnings. No grand speeches. Just efficiency. A raiding group vanished near the Carson Belt. No survivors, no distress call. The wreckage suggested precision strikes, not desperation. The pirates had been neutralized before they even realized they were under threat. Word spread fast. Humans, it turned out, did not fight like other species. They didn't roar. They didn't posture. They didn't escalate emotionally. They analyzed. They adapted. They ended threats permanently. Axar learned this weeks later back on his home world when news broadcasts began running constant updates about human strategic reorientation. His name never appeared, his species was never mentioned publicly. But he knew, every report felt like another weight added to his chest. He stopped sleeping. Grinix withdrew completely, his once brilliant feathers dull, his voice barely audible when he spoke. Axnil, the cautious one, drank himself into silence. None of them were heroes, none of them had intended to change the course of galactic history. They had just wanted to laugh. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council scrambled. Emergency sessions were called, committees formed, statements drafted and redrafted, softened, delayed, then abandoned. How did you apologize to a species you had spent decades reassuring that the galaxy was peaceful? How did you explain that peace had only existed because no one had tested it too hard? President Drachnar watched it all with grim resignation. He had seen this pattern before in other cycles with other species. The moment when idealism met reality and shattered. The difference this time was scale. Humanity wasn't just another rising civilization. Humanity remembered war. They had institutional memory of genocide, total mobilization, and extinction-level conflict. They didn't romanticize it, they feared it, but fear did not make them weak. It made them prepared. When the first official human communique arrived, it was short, polite, measured. It reaffirmed commitment to the Galactic Council, to diplomacy, to cooperation. And then quietly it outlined boundaries. Human assets would no longer tolerate harassment. Human citizens would no longer rely solely on Council security. Any hostile action would be treated as intentional, not cultural misunderstanding. The message ended with a line that unsettled every strategist who read it. We will continue to act peacefully until peace is no longer a rational assumption. That sentence circulated in classified briefings for months. Predator species began reconsidering old jokes. Prey species began requesting human protection treaties. And somewhere on Earth, a quiet faction that had once argued for disarmament sat in silence, mourning not their loss of influence but the loss of a dream. They had wanted humanity to be better than its past. Instead, the galaxy had reminded humanity why its past existed. Axar would never see a human again, not in person, not directly, but sometimes, late at night, he would replay the moment in his mind, the way that Diplomat's face had changed. The split second where restraint gave way to something ancient. He finally understood. Humans weren't prey pretending to be predators. They were predators pretending desperately to be something else. And the galaxy, in its arrogance, had forced them to stop pretending. Out among the stars, fleets moved quietly, not to conquer, not to intimidate, but to make one thing very clear. Peace was still possible, but it was no longer free. In this time, humanity would decide the price. The silence that followed humanity's shift was not empty. It was watchful. Across the galaxy, old assumptions began to crack. Species that had grown comfortable believing violence was a relic of their past suddenly found themselves rereading ancient doctrines, reopening sealed archives, and reassessing what civilized truly meant. Because the humans had not shouted, they had not threatened, they had simply adjusted. That scared everyone. The first real test came quietly, as these things always do. A minor trade dispute on the Outer Rim. A predator-aligned consortium accused a human shipping guild of violating an obscure transit regulation. Under the old assumptions, the humans would have apologized, negotiated, compromised. They had done so before many times. This time they responded differently. They complied with the letter of the law immediately and completely. Their ships altered routes, rerouted cargo, absorbed the loss without complaint. And then, without drama, they filed a counterclaim, perfectly documented, impeccably timed, backed by layers of precedent that no one had bothered to check in centuries. Within a standard week, the consortium's own shipping lanes were frozen by the Council's automated legal systems. Their appeals were denied before hearings were even scheduled. Their competitors, many of them human-owned or human-advised, absorbed their markets almost overnight. No weapons were fired. No voices were raised. The message was unmistakable. Humans did not need to roar to dominate, they only needed to pay attention. That was when the predators stopped laughing. Axar watched these developments from his homeworld with a growing sense of dread. Each report felt like another thread connecting back to that moment on the station. The salads, the laughter, the water thrown in a room meant for peace. He began to realize something that haunted him more than fear of retaliation. The humans had not changed. They had simply stopped hiding. On Earth, the internal debate never truly ended. Even as shipyards expanded and defense networks were modernized, there were voices that resisted the hardening line. Philosophers, historians, diplomats who argued that this was exactly how the old cycles began, that preparation had a way of becoming prophecy. But even they could not deny what the galaxy had shown them. Idealism without boundaries invited predators. And humans understood predators better than most. They had been fighting them since they first learned to walk upright under a hostile sun. The next incident was impossible to ignore. A coalition patrol, mostly composed of traditionally dominant predator species, intercepted a human research vessel near an unclaimed system. Officially, it was a routine inspection. Unofficially, it was a test, a reminder of who still believed themselves superior. The human vessel complied. It powered down its weapons, opened its logs, allowed boarders. The inspection team never returned. The patrol ships received a single transmission seconds later, calm, human, recorded not live. Inspection complete, your personnel are safe and have been returned to your nearest medical outpost. Future boarding attempts will be treated as hostile action. Attached were sensor recordings. The predators had boarded expecting submission. Instead, they encountered corridors designed for higher gravity, tighter spaces, and controlled lighting. Non-lethal countermeasures incapacitated them in under 12 seconds. Medical scans followed, wounds treated, memories of the encounter left intact. Humiliation, not death, had been the chosen weapon. The galaxy reeled. Because that restraint was more terrifying than annihilation. President Drachnar convened another emergency session. This time, the chamber was full. Even species that rarely attended sent observers. The question was no longer whether humanity was dangerous. The question was whether the galaxy could afford to alienate it. Drachnar spoke plainly. Humans are not preparing to conquer us, he said, they are preparing to survive us. That distinction mattered, it meant there was still a choice. But choices narrowed quickly. Human embassies began renegotiating treaties, not aggressively, methodically. Clauses about mutual defense were clarified, provisions against harassment were strengthened. Vague language that once allowed predators to exploit gray areas vanished. Some species resisted. Those species found human cooperation withdrawn. Not punished. Not attacked. Simply unavailable. Scientific collaboration paused, trade slowed, technical assistance redirected elsewhere. Entire economies that had quietly relied on human problem solvers began to feel strain. And still humanity did not threaten. They waited. Axar finally broke when he saw footage from Earth's public networks. A memorial, quiet, modest, dedicated not to soldiers but to diplomats, to explorers, to those who had believed sincerely that the galaxy could be better without force. The comments beneath the broadcast were restrained, thoughtful, painfully self-aware. We tried. We hoped. Now we adapt. No calls for vengeance. No cries for domination. Just acceptance. That terrified Axar more than rage ever could. He understood then that the humans' restraint at the exchange hadn't been weakness. It had been discipline, the kind forged only by a species that knew exactly what happened when discipline failed. The galaxy, slowly and reluctantly, began to learn the same lesson. Predator species altered their behavior, jokes disappeared from public forums, harassment incidents dropped sharply, not because of new laws but because no one wanted to be the example humanity chose to make. Prey species, meanwhile, began seeking proximity to humans. Cultural exchanges resumed cautiously, this time with genuine respect. Humans welcomed them as they always had, patient, protective, still kind. But no longer naive. Years later, historians would mark that cultural exchange as the turning point, not the day humanity became dangerous, but the day the galaxy realized it always had been by necessity and had chosen not to be. Axar would never escape his part in it, none of them would. They would live long lives haunted not by punishment but by understanding. They had not awakened a monster. They had reminded a guardian why it wore armor. And somewhere out among the stars humanity continued forward, still offering peace, still choosing restraint, but now when they extended an open hand. Everyone could see the strength in the arm behind it. And for the first time in a very long time, the galaxy learned a lesson humans had paid for in blood long before they ever reached the stars. Peace is not the absence of power. Peace is power. Held back.